Welcome back to the deep dive. We are here to cut through the noise, taking a whole stack of your sources, articles, philosophy, some really deep research, and pulling out the core truth for you.
And this time it's a bit different.
Yeah, it really is. If you're a regular listener, you know we're usually tackling things like, I don't know, venture capital models or the chaos in the global supply chain.
Right.
Today we're pivoting. We're going somewhere far more fundamental and honestly pretty philosophical.
We're talking about the relationship between social media, our very human need to remember, and just the sheer speed of modern life.
The sources you all shared are just incredible. They frame our daily scroll not as a technical problem, not about code or privacy settings, but as this profound existential mismatch.
And they use the lens of Albert Camus, of all people, to critique the absurdity of it all, the absurdity of modern attention.
That's the key, isn't it? The paradox that's really driving this entire deep dive is, well, it's simple on the surface.
It is. We use these platforms like a massive external hard drive for our lives. We post every milestone, we archive every photo, document every single meal.
We're leaving more data traces than any generation in history. It's not even close.
And yet, and this is the core of it, why does our internal, our felt memory, that sense of a cohesive, owned past, why does it feel thinner, more elusive than ever before?
It feels less satisfying. It's the ultimate modern trade-off, right? We get perfect digital retention. Every single bit is saved.
But we sacrifice personal recollection.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack this central thesis that came from the sources. Social media is fundamentally not designed to keep memory.
No, it's engineered exclusively to move attention. It's an engine of flow.
So we're going to explore the consequences of mistaking a circulation system for a repository of the soul.
And we have to start with this truly chilling insight that just defines the whole discussion. The sources state, social media is not the place where memory dies a sudden death.
That's not what happens.
No. It is the place where memory is, and I'm quoting here, never allowed to stop long enough to become memory.
Wow. That distinction, stopping versus becoming, that's powerful.
It's everything.
Okay, let's dive straight into section 1 then. The paradox of digital retention. It really gets at this profoundly human instinct we all have. This feeling that if I post a picture, if I share a memory, if it's seen by other people, it somehow achieves a kind of immortality. But the sources call this a foundational existential misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's the term they use.
So where's the breakdown? Where does that logic fail?
The breakdown is in the logic of the mechanism itself. We're unconsciously projecting this ancient human function of memory onto a hyper-modern commercial platform.
And they don't operate by the same rules.
Not even remotely. When we talk about human memory, we're talking about an internal process, a process of transformation.
Okay, so what does human memory actually retain? What sticks?
It retains the moments that have fundamentally changed us. It's the stuff that sticks through repetition, reflection, emotional depth, the intellectual struggle.
And it often comes back to you spontaneously, right?
Yeah.
Not because you searched for it.
Exactly. It's about internal gravity. The moments that really matter are slow, they're heavy, and they sink deep into our psyche.
And the platform's logic, how does that compare?
The platform's logic is all acceleration and circulation. It retains whatever is currently receiving attention. That's its sole metric. That's the only thing that's measurable and profitable.
So the system archives the data perfectly. The photo, the timestamp, the caption, it's all there.
Flawlessly. Right. But its core logic is flow, not preservation. We approach it with this beautiful illusion that it's a modern diary.
Right, it's something we're writing for our future selves, a space dedicated to our own continuity.
But a diary is written for the self. The platform is structured for the relentless current, the perpetual flow.
And that flow, that current of information, it has no capacity to remember, does it?
It has no capacity, and, more importantly, no need to remember. Its entire function is to move everything along to the next second, the next post, the next reaction.
So the moment we drop a personal memory into that current,
you subject it to the rule of attention. And attention is inherently volatile. It's ephemeral. The algorithm doesn't need us to deeply understand or reflect on anything.
it just needs us to stay on the screen.
For 3 more seconds.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That is the only retention the system is built to prioritize.
And to guarantee those 3 extra seconds, the system has to constantly introduce novelty, the new thing.
And this is where memory, even though it's perfectly archived on a server somewhere, is functionally, well, it's destroyed, or at least rendered useless.
And the novelty, the new thing, it doesn't need to be better or deeper, does it?
No, not at all. It just needs to be different enough to override the content that's been on the screen for, 90 seconds?
So the memory isn't deliberately deleted by some, malicious code.
No, nothing like that. It's simply covered up. It's buried by this perpetual stream of new fragments, pushed down so far that the effort to go find it just outweighs any potential reward.
This sounds exactly like that Camus concept you mentioned, the orderly absurdity.
It's a perfect fit.
The idea that something can be deeply irrational, but it's carried out with this perfect, almost chilling efficiency.
It is the quiet tragedy of the operating system. It's an order built for maximal movement. No one has to force us to forget. No one explicitly says, stop remembering that profound thing from last Tuesday.
But there's just no room.
There's simply no available room to remember for long. Every single moment is archived perfectly on some server farm in Oregon.
But functionally, almost nothing is retained in a way that actually nourishes the self.
Right. We live in a world where everything is stored as data, but nearly nothing is held as living meaning.
And this has to lead to a kind of fierce competition for significance. If every memory we share has to compete for a like, a comment, a momentary gaze, what happens to the experiences that are unshareable?
They become the necessary casualties of the flow.
The quiet moments.
Yes. The sources put it so beautifully. They talk about the quiet moments of slow internal realization, the long, subtle transformations of character.
Sorrows that don't have a beautiful, Instagrammable image attached to them.
Exactly. Or thoughts that you just can't condense into a 4-line quote. These things. This is the vast majority of a meaningful human life.
And these quiet truths, they just don't have what it takes to attract and hold attention. They sink.
They sink. And when they sink, we feel this disappointment, this sense of loss. We feel betrayed by the system.
But the sources are clear that disappointment isn't because the platform is malicious.
No, it's because we demand the wrong function from the system. We expect a commercial attention broker to act like a soul keeper.
And when you put it like that, the expectation is fundamentally absurd.
Completely. The social media platform never signed a contract to retain your memory the way a spouse or a trusted journal would. We just projected that sacred function onto a mechanical efficiency system.
So the system didn't betray our memory.
It simply operated according to its internal, purely commercial logic. The relentless optimization of attention circulation.
I think a lot of listeners might push back right here, though. They'd say, but wait, I have that memories feature. It shows me a photo from 5 years ago today. Isn't that the system remembering?
That is a crucial challenge, and the distinction here is what really defines this entire deep dive. The system is showing you evidence. It's showing you data.
It's not memory.
No. True human memory, the kind that shapes who you are, it's often involuntary. It returns to you unprompted and causes real reflection. The platform's memory is always prompted. It's packaged.
And it's designed to create a momentary emotional ping to keep you scrolling.
Exactly. Not to create a lasting internal change. One is data storage, the other is identity formation.
So if the sources are right, the only thing truly preserved and prioritized in this whole digital current is moving attention. It's just a machine engineered to keep our gaze perpetually in motion.
And that movement, that acceleration, is the absolute antithesis of reflection and recollection. Those are born from stillness, from voluntary return. The paradox is that maximum storage capacity has led to minimum personal meaning.
Okay, so if we accept that mechanical reality, we have to ask the deeper human question. And that takes us into section 2, the psychological roots.
Right.
Why? Why do we, even if we sort of know the system is built for this kind of forgetting, why do we keep sending our most important memories and vulnerabilities right into that current? Why do we self-sabotage?
Well, because the deepest psychological root here is this primitive human fear of disappearing in silence.
The anxiety of existence.
Yes. If my experience wasn't validated, if it wasn't recognized or recorded externally, did it even really happen? It's the fear of passing without leaving a single ripple.
We crave a trace.
We do. And before these platforms, memory was anchored in things that were slow and heavy.
What do you mean by that? Slow and heavy?
Think of pre-digital memory. It was repeated storytelling, right? Within a small circle of family or friends, it was physical rituals, repeated over years. A fun day dinner, a specific holiday tradition.
Or old, tangible objects. A worn-out childhood toy, a specific smell. Things with the marks of time on them.
Exactly. And those they didn't spread widely, but they remained. They demanded a deep, ongoing relationship to avoid being replaced.
They were anchored by presence, by patience.
And now, Social media offers this irresistible shortcut. Instead of nurturing that deep recollection by a few people who truly know us, we get to be seen instantly by thousands of strangers.
And we mistake that widespread, momentary gaze for deep, lasting remembrance.
That confusion, that's the critical illusion.
The confusion between being seen and being remembered.
And this is where the sources lean so heavily on Camus. He helps us make this critical distinction between the outward gaze and the inward return.
Okay, break that down for us in a modern context. The gaze versus the return.
The gaze is the instantaneous validation. You post a photo of a beautiful sunset, people see it, they like it, they affirm it, and they move on. That's the gaze.
Fleeting.
Very. The return is the involuntary, spontaneous recollection of that sunset 6 months from now, when the light hits a certain way, and it brings back with it the feeling of who you were in that moment.
The anxieties you had, the internal conversation.
All of it. And that return requires no prompt from an app. It requires an internal space where that memory was allowed to settle.
But the flow guarantees we never get that internal space. It guarantees that, quote, always something else is pushing in before we had a chance to reflect.
Yes. The system literally trains our consciousness to be pulled perpetually forward, to consume the next piece of content. It never rewards, and it certainly doesn't allow for that slow, voluntary process of looking backward and integrating the past.
So the flow is designed to maximize consumption.
And reflection is non-consumptive. It's a dead end for the algorithm.
So in essence, we're trying to fight the void of existential meaninglessness, with pure velocity.
That's the core tragic paradox of the modern condition, according to these sources. We as modern individuals carry this profound anxiety about dying without anyone knowing how we truly lived.
So we mount an existential rebellion.
We do. We document every second. But our method of rebellion is completely flawed. We're leaving our traces in a system specifically engineered to erase those traces with speed. We're fighting absurdity by embracing a mechanism that is, itself, even more absurd.
So when we share a deep thought or a vulnerable moment, like right as it's happening, we're not really looking to understand it.
No, we are seeking confirmation.
You just want to prevent that feeling from being swallowed up in silence.
Exactly. We need the instant reflection of the external mirror. We need confirmation that our sadness is recognized, that our joy is justified. And confirmation requires speed, the immediate influx of likes, comments, emojis.
Well, memory needs the exact opposite. It needs time, silence, digestion.
And the sources are very clear on this. Confirmation and memory are fundamentally incompatible. They cannot coexist peacefully in the same accelerated space.
Which brings us right back to what the sources call the ownership fallacy. We confuse recording a moment with truly possessing it.
And this fallacy is the source of so much of our digital disappointment. We feel that if a moment is saved on the platform, we own it forever.
But the platform owns the data.
And the meaning remains external, unintegrated. The sources offer a really powerful metric for true possession. A memory truly belongs to us only when it changes the way we live afterward.
So if I have a perfectly archived photo of a trip from 5 years ago, but scrolling past it doesn't prompt me to change my behavior or reflect on a mistake or deepen a relationship,
then it's not a living memory. It's merely evidence.
Just a signpost pointing to a moment in time.
Exactly. Divorced from the internal experience that should have given it meaning. And evidence without living meaning is a very cold comfort. This is the difference between having a record of your life and actually having a life.
It sounds like we've become addicted to external validation to bypass the difficult, slow work of internal recollection.
We've traded the hard work of patience for the easy reward of validation. We send our memories to the wrong destination because we fear the silence that authentic memory demands.
So the core idea of this section is,
we don't use social media to store memory. We use it to escape the fear that our lives will pass without making a sound if no one is there to see them.
that fear of silence, it drives the demand. But now we need to look at how the machine answers that demand. In section 3, we look at the engine of forgetting.
The cold operational logic.
Right. What is the system actually designed to maximize?
If you strip away all the rhetoric about connection and community, the function is ruthlessly simple. The platform exists to keep attention always moving.
Attention is the currency.
It is the vital unit. It's the only non-negotiable metric. Not depth, not wisdom, not lasting memory, just movement. Everything that appears in that space exists only as long as it can successfully hold your gaze for a few seconds.
And once it fails to hold that gaze,
It is replaced instantly. without ceremony. It's just pushed down until it becomes statistically invisible. And the sources remind us this isn't censorship.
It's just efficiency.
The platform isn't evil. It's just an indifferent logical machine.
Which means that memory, which as we've established is created by silent, repeated return, is completely incompatible with this economy.
Utterly incompatible. A memory placed in the flow gets one chance, right now, to capture attention. If it fails, it is immediately forgotten. Not because the content was bad, but because it violated the system's core rule.
Do not stop the flow.
Do not stop the flow. This mechanism forces us, whether we're posting or consuming, to live in a world where meaning must constantly compete.
And that competition is profoundly unnatural for human experience, isn't it?
It really is. True human meaning, true memory, it's born from natural repetition, from the non-competitive, unquantified space of just being. Sitting quietly, sharing a moment with one other person.
But in this architecture, your most sincere thoughts are pitted against professionally engineered, stimulating fragments.
Videos, memes, outreach cycles. And the winning content doesn't need to be truer or better. It just needs to be faster at arresting the scrolling finger.
And this rapid flow, this perpetual novelty, it satisfies a deeper human fear, doesn't it? The fear of the face, the slowness of the void.
That's a brilliant connection back to the existentialism. Humans are often terrified of true emptiness, the kind of silence that forces you to confront yourself and the lack of inherent meaning in the universe.
And the feed is the perfect distraction.
The perfect constant distraction. There's always the next thing to fill that discomforting void before it has a chance to really settle in. We are constantly shielded from the necessary discomfort of deep self-reflection, which always begins in silence.
So memory, which is by its nature slow and heavy, becomes, well, it's not just irrelevant, it's inconvenient fuel for this acceleration engine.
It's an obstruction. It doesn't provide the continuous low-level stimulation the system requires to function. Therefore, if a memory is going to survive at all, it has to be repackaged.
Repackaged to behave like content.
Yes. Molded into a form that's easy to scroll past, immediately reactive, instantly comprehensible.
Can you give me an example of what that repackaging looks like?
Sure. Look at how we frame deep emotion online. If you're grieving, the platform doesn't reward the complexity of that, or the exhaustion, or the slow, meandering path of processing loss.
No, it rewards a perfectly composed, instantly accessible statement.
A quote, a sad but beautiful photo, a carefully curated paragraph that distills the pain into something immediately understandable and reactive. That is, memory being forced to act like high-speed content.
And when that simplified performance fails to get the reactions,
we conclude the memory itself lacks value. We start judging the depth of our own lived experience by the metric of external reaction.
That's the danger zone.
It leads to that painful question the sources pose. If a memory fails to hold attention, is it less meaningful? Operationally, the system has to answer yes, because unviewed content has zero value to the platform.
But human life, thankfully, answers no.
But if we keep outsourcing our validation, we start to align our internal scale with the platform's external metrics. Moments that go unnoticed become labeled internally as not enough.
And this leads to the ultimate alienation of our own experience. We stop living just to experience things.
And start living to see if the experience will be seen. It transforms memory from a personal foundation into a past due performance.
Because even the most profound moment we shared has to be constantly reinforced by new attention, or it just loses its digital significance.
And since continuous circulation is guaranteed, no memory, no matter how cherished, is allowed to occupy that space for long. It must be replaced by the next fragment.
The system is perfectly ordered to ensure recollection is impossible, even though the data is permanently archived.
It's an orderly absurdity. No one tells you to forget, but everything is structurally arranged to make remembering a choice that defies the primary function of the machine.
The effort just becomes prohibitive.
And so the mechanism is clear. Social media doesn't destroy memory. It just places memory in a current where the only thing allowed to stay is leaving attention.
And this relentless pace, this circulation, it leads directly to a profound existential consequence.
Which brings us to section 4, the state of living ahead of oneself. This is the feeling of existential exhaustion.
The sources describe this unique modern malaise. We experience a high volume of events, we have a continuous feed of information, but we suffer from a profound lack of presence.
We see, react, and know things so quickly, but nothing settles long enough to fundamentally change how we live.
And that lack of settling creates a specific kind of fatigue.
It's not the tiredness of a long day of physical work or deep intellectual focus. It's the exhaustion of the attention age. It's the feeling of being perpetually tired because no internal processing is ever completed.
Every thought, every emotional surge, before it can be fully understood,
Is instantly pushed out by the next fragment of content or the next reaction that's demanded of us.
our emotions have no empty space to self-crystallize. They just stay formless, externalized.
And this is exactly where Canva's philosophy becomes so relevant again. Meaning, he observed, arises primarily in the pause. That moment of stillness where you confront reality without distraction.
And the pause is the platform's ultimate enemy.
Because a pause means the user stops scrolling, stops generating data. The system is engineered to eliminate every possible gap, every moment of internal silence,
So it ensures continuous connection.
while simultaneously guaranteeing alienation from your own experience.
And this relentless pushing forward is the very essence of living ahead of oneself.
Yes, Sun Trick Chino. It's the perfect diagnosis of our hyper-sharing behavior. We tell the world about our sadness before we've actually sat quietly with the sadness itself.
We photograph the spectacular moment before we've fully lived in it, before we've internalized the sensory experience.
We react publicly before we've taken the time to truly understand the nuances of what we're reacting to. We are constantly preempting our own existence by externalizing the moment before it's been internalized.
What's the residue of that preemptive living? What's left over?
Emptiness. But, and this is crucial, it's not the emptiness of lacking things. We have an abundance of things.
Right.
It's the emptiness that comes because everything passes too quickly to be truly owned. If you never allow a moment to settle inside you, if you immediately broadcast it for confirmation, you never really possess the experience.
It just remains a piece of unintegrated external data.
Which is what drives that painful internal questioning we see everywhere. Did I really live that moment? Why did that trip pass so quickly? Why do I remember so little detail from last month?
And Camus, through the lens of these sources, would say,
It's not poor memory. We haven't forgotten. We haven't had time to remember. Remembering isn't a reflex, it's the voluntary return of consciousness to an experience.
but the system trains our consciousness to be perpetually anticipatory, pulled forward to the next notification, the next piece of content.
It rewards anticipating the future, never recollecting the past.
The image you used before, the person on a conveyor belt running faster than their own steps, that's perfect here. We're moving, we're active.
But we have no sense of where we stand internally. Our internal coordinates are erased by the constant relentless motion.
And our lives are abraded down into a series of cut and paste fragments.
Instead of continuous cohesive stream of deep experience, we become a series of reactions, not a consistent self.
And that fragmentation is the true danger.
It's the ultimate tragedy, really. The tragedy isn't that social media makes us forget. The tragedy is that it forces us to live at a rhythm so accelerated that nothing is slow enough to become memory, and nothing is deep enough to settle and become part of a cohesive life. We exist perpetually on the surface.
And this constant fracturing of memory, the state of living ahead of oneself, it has to destabilize the most critical anchors of human existence.
Identity and relationships.
Exactly. Let's delve into that in Section 5.
When that foundation of internal memory erodes, identity becomes dangerously fragile. In a world anchored by memory, identity is built on what has changed us. The long-term internalized lessons.
But in an attention-based world?
In an attention-based world, identity is built on the nearest external reaction.
So we're constantly updating our self-image based on the feedback loop.
Constantly. I'm not sure who I am, so I'll post something funny, it gets 1,000 likes.
Yeah.
Conclusion, I am the funny one. Then I'll post something profound. If that resonates, I must be the deep one.
The sources call this a quiet but severe form of alienation.
It is. We're not creating our identity from the inside out. We are perpetually borrowing it, adjusting it based on the external gaze and its ever-shifting metrics of approval.
That sounds exhausting. If you don't have a stable memory base, a core knowledge of what truly changed you, your identity has to constantly reprove itself.
And that leads to a silent exhaustion. You're continuously required to perform for the external gaze, but you're never allowed the stillness required to actually be internally.
When memory can't answer the question, who am I?
You borrow the temporary circulating answer provided by the attention market, and that identity is volatile because the flow is volatile.
And relationships suffer the same exact fate. We move from bonds built on shared silence and repetition
Just heavy memories.
to relationships measured purely by frequency of appearance.
It's a semantic trap. We confuse connectivity with closeness. The people who appear most often in our feed are tagged as closer or better friends.
And those who are absent, maybe living a deeper, slower life offline, are perceived as farther away, no matter the actual history.
We connect ceaselessly. We are always in touch. But we rarely stay long enough for a relationship to mature into a shared, settled memory.
The sources pose that piercing question. Do we remember others because we genuinely lived moments with them that changed us?
Or do we remember them simply because we saw their updated profile recently?
And if it's the latter, the relationship is entirely dependent on the platform's circulation, not on mutual presence.
And when we externalize our emotions instantly, we compromise the intimacy and depth of those connections.
Let's elaborate on that idea of emotions as distributed content.
Well, when a profound emotion strikes joy, fear, loss, our instinct is immediate broadcast. We're sad, we immediately tell our network. We're proud, we immediately post the evidence.
But Kama's insight here is crucial.
That profound emotions need time to be alone before they're externalized. They need solitude to be internally processed, to take a unique shape within the self.
Without that digestion period, we're just distributing them, broadcasting a raw signal.
Instead of understanding them. And ununderstood emotions, no matter how widely they're shared, can't integrate and become living memory. They just remain a vague trace in the flow.
And finally, all of this constant fragmentation destroys our sense of continuity.
Yes. Existence feels real and meaningful when we perceive a coherent narrative thread in our lives. When life is chopped into thousands of reactive fragments, all vying for a momentary glimpse, that thread just vanishes.
We live in short, intense bursts, reacting in pieces.
And eventually we feel less like a continuous story and more like those series of cut and paste fragments we talked about. If memory isn't deep enough to tie yesterday's self to today's self, then our identity becomes purely reactionary, ephemeral.
The conclusion being that we haven't lost our identity because social media is too strong.
We lost it because we fundamentally misplaced its foundation. We put it in a space that was never designed to hold it.
The quiet cost is just astronomical. When attention replaces memory, identity becomes fragile, relationships become thin.
And life is reduced to a series of validated reactions that never quite manage to become a cohesive life story.
Okay, we've established the psychological roots and the mechanical consequences. So now we have to ask, how do we achieve clarity without just descending into blame? Section 6, dialogue with the system, is critical here because the natural reflex is to find a culprit, to rage against the platforms.
And that's precisely where Camus, according to these sources, would caution us. He was always vigilant against that human tendency to seek an immediate culprit when we suffer.
It's easy to blame the large anonymous platforms.
It is, but it distracts us from the more responsible question. What did we demand of this mechanical system that exceeded its core function?
I can hear a listener saying, but they do design it to be addictive. They do manipulate us. Why is focusing only on that blame reductive in this specific context?
Because it obscures the operational logic. Yes, the platform is designed to optimize attention circulation, which maximizes profit and engagement. But fundamentally, its purpose is flow, not storage. This isn't a conspiracy, it is its operating logic.
And much of our suffering, as Camus would say, comes from demanding the wrong things from the world.
Exactly. We demand justice from indifferent nature, meaning from indifferent machinery, and we demand deep, slow memory from a system created for immediate, rapid forgetting.
So blaming social media for failing to retain our memories is philosophically the same as blaming the sea for not retaining the waves.
It's the perfect cold analogy. The system is doing precisely what it was engineered to do: move attention efficiently. We're suffering because the tool doesn't behave like a reflective human capable of remembrance.
And the platform's indifference to depth isn't moral, it's mathematical.
Precisely. This is the measurement trap. Depth, reflection, internalized meaning, slow personal transformation. These things are fundamentally unmeasurable. You can't put memory on a dashboard.
But attention, viewing time, click-through rates, reactions,
all instantly measurable, actionable, and profitable. In any system that operates exclusively on what can be measured, the unmeasurable, no matter its human importance, will be marginalized. Not out of malice, but because it can't be factored into the optimization equation.
So what about the common solution people propose? Just quitting? The digital detox, total withdrawal. Do the sources suggest that's enough?
They're skeptical. Simply leaving social media doesn't solve the underlying psychological expectation, the functional illusion.
If you leave, but you still crave that external confirmation for every thought,
You'll only transfer your disappointment elsewhere, to your partner, your family, your colleagues. The fundamental problem is the expectation we placed on the external world to hold our internal meaning for us. Why send the deepest parts of your life to a space created for the most rapidly replaceable things?
we have to accept the inescapable mismatch.
It's absolute. Memory needs slow repetition. The platform needs continuous, urgent novelty. Memory needs silence. The platform needs constant, affirming feedback. Memory needs stillness. The platform needs perpetual movement.
Mistaking these functions means we live at the wrong rhythm.
We live fast for attention, hoping against all logic to be remembered for long. We share immediately, hoping that allows the emotion to settle. We are continuously present everywhere but crave internal depth.
This confrontation isn't pleasant, but it seems necessary.
It is. The cold truth this section provides is that social media doesn't steal our memory. We drop our memory ourselves when we ask a mechanical system of attention circulation to do the sacred work of human recollection. The platform merely facilitates our own choice to prioritize speed over depth.
So if the solution isn't blaming the platform and simply quitting isn't enough, if the internal expectation remains, what is the path forward? Section 7 is about achieving existential lucidity.
The goal, as the sources frame it, is humble but profound. Lucidity. It means achieving absolute clarity on the true function and limits of every space we inhabit.
Social media is a space for passing through. Memory is a space for staying.
And Camus teaches that suffering comes not because the world lacks meaning, but because we constantly misplace the meaning we create.
So, practically speaking, we stop demanding that the platform handle our entire internal life. We use it for what it is, a quick circulation tool for passing information, that's it.
It requires an internal recalibration. If we want memory to thrive, we have to stop outsourcing the fundamental work of internal life. Memory must be anchored in things that are slow, heavy, and non-competitive. And this requires intentional, sometimes difficult action.
What does that intentional action look like in the face of the constant flow?
It means creating and prioritizing non-competitive spaces. It's a recurring conversation with a loved one that is consciously not shared online. It's a physical habit, like reading or writing, repeated in silence.
It's keeping a personal notebook without the pressure of likes or external metrics.
It is cultivating a relationship defined by mutual presence and quiet shared history, not by endless public display.
These are what the sources call the small acts of rebellion against the absurdity of speed.
And that rebellion is strictly internal. It's not designed to change the system. It's designed to prevent the self from being crushed by the system's efficiency. We have to rediscover the dignity of the unseen.
That might be the most difficult challenge for the modern psyche, which is so addicted to the external gaze, the dignity of the unseen.
It means accepting the difficult, quiet truth that not every moment has to be seen to be meaningful. Some of the most significant moments in our lives, the deepest transformations, the profound realizations, the honest sorrows, only truly exist, only take their proper shape when no one witnesses them.
Human dignity lies in the ability to live honestly when there is no audience.
And when we stop demanding that the platform remember for us, we begin the vital act of self-selection.
We start to choose what's actually worthy of remembering. We realize not everything has to be saved, told, or reacted to immediately.
And that act of letting most of the flow just pass by, of not trying to capture everything, is precisely what gives life its shape. Meaning isn't about having an archive of everything. It's about having the courage to let the vast majority of life pass in order to hold on to the few heavy things that truly impacted and changed us.
This path doesn't promise safety or ease. It requires responsibility.
Yes. The responsibility to remember, the responsibility to return to experiences, and the responsibility to consciously live slower than the current of attention when our internal dignity demands it.
This clarity is powerful. The disappointment we feel isn't a failure on our part. It's the inevitable result of putting the slow, heavy mechanism of memory into the fast, light engine of attention.
We have to start confusing the speed of communication with the depth of life. We have to take back the labor of recollection.
This has truly been a deep dive into the structure of modern experience. Thank you for helping us navigate these complex and really beautiful sources.
My pleasure. They remind us of a foundational and difficult truth, one that bears repeating as you go through your day. Memory cannot be entrusted to the flow.
It has to be cultivated.
It must be held by presence, by stillness and by intentional return, or it will not be held at all.
And that is the final provocative thought we leave you with, learner. If social media and every single one of your digital traces disappeared tomorrow, what parts of your life would remain deep enough to be spontaneously and powerfully remembered? If the answer causes a moment of silence, that is not a sign of failure. That is your starting point. We'll see you next time on The Deep